Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an incredible session so far, and the next session I think is a really interesting one. I'm going to take this chance, if I may, just to say one thing about the 92nd Street Y. Right now we've launched a new campaign, and we're asking everyone here in the hall and on the live stream to ask a question, which is, what is it that makes life extraordinary? What is it that makes life extraordinary? And if you'd like to enter this competition, it's at 92y.org/worlds. So 92y.org/worlds. And you can win an iPad, but it is not any kind of iPad. It is an iPad filled with the very best programs from here on the stage of the 92nd Street Y over the years. I'm also going to add something else on the 92nd Street Y for those in the hall. Many of you will know that, of course, we don't just do events here in the hall. Above you, we have a swimming pool and we have a full health and fitness center. Many of you are here for 4 days, so if anyone wants to work out, have a chat to one of our staff, we'd be delighted to welcome you as a workout as our guest anytime you'd like. Our next session is a very special one with a slight change in plan, which is to say this is a session supported by our partners, ERICSSON. I do want to say for a moment that one of the real exciting things about working with ERICSSON is from the start of our partnership, they've really got behind what this event is about. They're an organization who is really committed to starting a new kind of conversation, and we've all, Mashable, the UN Foundation, and 92Y, been very fortunate to have their support as we go along. This is an ERICSSON panel featuring some issues which are very close to their hearts, and indeed featuring their CEO. On stage, we're going to have Jeffrey Sachs. Jeff, of course, is an old friend of the 92nd Street Y. He's a director of the Earth Institute and Columbia University Professor of Sustainable Development and Health Policy. He's also a special advisor to the UN Secretary General and president and co-founder of the Millennium Promise Alliance. Joining him in conversation will be the UN Director of News and Media, Stefan Dujarric. And once they've kicked off and began the conversation, they're going to be joined by Hans Vestberg, who is the president and CEO of ERICSSON. ERICSSON, of course, are the world's leading provider of telecommunications, technology and services, operating in more than 180 countries. Under Hans Vestberg's direction, ERICSSON has become the main driver towards a network society where connectivity is the fuel of progress. So to begin this conversation, and then soon to be joined by Hans Vestberg, it's a pleasure to welcome to the stage Jeff Sachs and Stefan Dujarric.
Good afternoon, Professor Sachs.
Hey, everybody.
Great. Welcome to this session on using technology to achieve the goal of universal education, which is, of course, as many of you know, one of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. And I think it's great that we get to talk about education here on the Upper East Side, because I think those of us who are fortunate enough to live here have a pretty warped view of what the needs of education is. You know, are the meals organic? Is Mandarin optional, or is it compulsory in our schools?
And I can tell you what it's like on the Upper West Side.
Exactly. So in fact, we could speak on that, I think, for quite some time. But I think, you know, as we all know, the problems of education in most parts of the world are much more basic. Is there a school? Does it have a roof? Does it have a teacher who's trained? Are there children? Are there books? Are there girls attending school? So for most development challenges, as we know, there are no quick fixes. It's such a complex issue, and education is very much in that vein. And I'm wondering, Professor Sachs, if we could start off by talking a bit about where we are on meeting that goal of universal education.
Well, it's a pretty basic set of issues, as you've already started to sketch. There are about 100 million kids at the primary school age, which worldwide means grades 1 through 8, typically, that aren't in school. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but the overwhelming reason is poverty. There just aren't schools in the areas where these kids live. A lot of poor places are also conflict-ridden places. Causation runs in both directions. Conflict causes poverty. Poverty causes conflict. Kids, of course, are stuck in the middle of that morass. And when you start to disentangle what to do very practically, as long as there's peace, then there are some basic things that can be done on schooling. If there isn't peace, making peace is the first step. But in a peaceful, impoverished place, it's pretty basic programming. Are there schools available? How far do the kids have to walk? When they get there, is there a safe structure? Is there a trained teacher? Is there safe water for them? Because kids can't sit for hours in a place without water. Is there some kind of midday meal or breakfast meal? Because often these kids are coming from hungry homes. Try to learn on an empty stomach for a chronically undernourished kid can't be done. Are there hygienic facilities? Is there hygienic facilities for girls? Are there sanitary napkins for girls available for girls that have started menstruating? These are very basic questions. There's nothing terribly complicated about them. They are all the reflections of extreme poverty. And they all reflect a kind of poverty trap, which is if you can't educate the population, you can't get out of poverty. But if you're stuck in poverty, you may not be able to provide education for the kids. And that's the whole idea of the Millennium Development Goals: break that vicious circle, get some help, get some organization, get some things done. When Hans comes, we'll talk about one major way to break that vicious circle, which is adding in some technology, because that's an amazing empowerer of getting a lot of these things done. But the basics still are not in place. Then there's one more point that we should add right at the start, and that is that the Millennium Development Goals aimed too low. They aim for primary education, but one of the basic realities of life in the 21st century is, even in an impoverished place, if you can't complete at least a secondary education, you can't really get the skills to gain a foothold in the world economy today. Every part of the world's interconnected. If you want to make basic industry, basic food processing, basic high-value crops, you need enough skills to be able to do that. We live in a technological age. We live in an age where workers in one place face competition from workers in the rest of the world. And aiming for primary education, of course, makes sense in a world where 100 million kids aren't getting that primary education, but it doesn't make sense as an end point. And that's another huge break point in the world, which is that kids who are able to complete primary education very often have absolutely no means, especially the girls, to go on for secondary education. Secondary education is not free, even notionally, in a lot of poor countries because the budgets can't support it. The girls tend to face discrimination compared to their brothers, and the end result is that we lose that whole generation, even if they get through the primary school.
So the challenges are great. Can you identify a number of the success stories that we've seen in which countries and why some countries have been more successful than others in education?
Well, first, if a country has a source of income, if it's got energy supplies, mining, some light industry that has enabled it to get some economic development going, and it's at peace, generally those places have been able to achieve primary education. So there's lots of success in the world in the sense that China, now in India with the big scaling up of primary education, all through Latin America, huge progress in coverage of education, big rise of literacy rates. It's a moving target. We're trying to get everyone in. Right. 30 years ago, I don't know the fraction offhand, but a very substantial part, 40 or 50% of kids wouldn't have had a chance. So this is a direction that's positive. It's the gap that's so frustrating because that's still 100 million kids. Right. But there's a lot of success. The failures come in places that are just so damn poor they can't get their act together, or places that are so miserably governed that they haven't tried.
Right. And here we've...
Hey there.
Hello there.
How are you?
Fine, I'm sorry.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
Great.
Sorry for the interruption.
Great. Well,
No
it's
interruption.
not interruption. You were in fact expected. So welcome.
Thank you. I can see that I was expected to come.
Exactly. Well, we've Professor Sachs has very clearly laid out some of where we are in the state of meeting that goal of education, primary education, which he in fact said was not ambitious enough. Can you talk a bit about your experience in terms of ERICSSON and the role that technology can help in meeting that goal and in helping with better education?
Absolutely. Let me start by where we are in the total industry and then just bring it down how I see the mobility and broadband being extremely transformative for many purposes, and education would be one. We took 100 years to get 1 billion people having a fixed line, roughly 25 years to get 5 billion mobile subscriptions. We have 5.5 right now. It will not stop there. That's interesting. We're going to end up with 7 to 8 billion mobile subscriptions by 2015. So that's fantastic. 90% of the Earth population will have mobile coverage. But secondly is that by 2016, we believe that roughly 5 billion people will have mobile broadband. 5 billion people. Just imagine the work that you are doing, working with digital content, social networking, is going to be a lot more people coming into the internet. Probably 3 times more than we have today. That together will create, I would say, the second wave of our technology, when we're going to see that technology transforming other industries, transforming ways of working, ways of being. We call that in ERICSSON a network society. Anything that benefits from being connected will be connected. In that piece, of course, it's extremely important to think about education, because suddenly in the most remote areas, people can get access to digital information. But I think more important is, of course, that teachers get a chance to get the information so they can teach their children. Maybe not that all children will have access to the mobile broadband and having their smartphones, but think about when the teachers get the chance to get all the education, all the information from the digital society that we're into, and bringing that out in rural areas, or any area, I would say. It will open up. It will not make a difference where you're born and where you are, what type of education you're going to get, if this plays out well. And that's why I'm believing that the mobility and the broadband has a huge transformative possibility on education. And Jeff has probably talked about the pilots that we're doing in Africa, the early things we see. It is a great reception and great possibility.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to arrive. Because I described the baseline, which is not enough schools or no schools, no teachers, no water, no hygiene, and so on as a baseline. But I said as soon as you arrived, we'd talk about what technology can do to really empower the teachers and the schools and the kids in that situation. And I think that the most amazing fact, and it is what this industry has done, that no other industry, by the way, in history has done by itself, and that has been able to reach in on a commercial basis to the poorest places of the world and get essentially universal coverage. You don't have that in healthcare. You don't have that in consumer products. People say Coca-Cola is everywhere, but it's not being it's not being consumed by people everywhere. Not everyone has access to it. This is a technology that is completely penetrating the rural societies, even the poorest places of the world. So what we figured out was that there's an opportunity for even the most rudimentary schools to suddenly leapfrog into the information age, and to do it through wireless. You don't need the fiber there. And we're seeing it in a project in the Millennium Villages that ERICSSON is empowering called Connect to Learn, which is really the idea of let's connect kids so that they are connected to information and connected to each other across the world. All of a sudden, you can make social networks that go, and we've got it from rural southwest Uganda to Greenwich, Connecticut. It's an incredible network, and it works. Actually, the kids are fascinated. They're engaged. It opens everybody's eyes, and it transforms the whole educational process.
Well, if we can talk a bit more about these pilots, because I think I'd like to get a better idea of clearly what it brings in these pilots. You talk about the connectivity between two very different places, but what does it mean actually for the students in those classrooms or in those schools? What do they have in their hands? What do the teachers have in their hands?
I think that first of all, I think Jeff said it. I mean, first of all, you need to have the brick and mortar of a school, right. and that is sort of have a place to gather. But how we have done it is we are trying to get the lowest cost. We're not doing using products that are used just for lowest cost. We use the same products in the US market as we do in Africa. So the piece of the network is the same, and we can bring down the cost because we're using the same standard technology worldwide, and that's very important, regardless of country. Secondly, we have also now with the cloud, I mean, think about the cloud computing is a fantastic way of bringing down the cost for using a software. So what we have now is a PC as a service. You put the PC in the cloud and you bring down the barrier dramatically. You don't need to have the PC. You need a dumb receiver, meaning a screen and a keyboard. So that we provide out in the most remote areas, a PC in the cloud solution on a 2G, 3G network. Out of that, of course, then you need content. You need training, education content. But remember, only the basic content to get out to the internet is huge. Just imagine how much information is on Wikipedia, Google, or whatever that people can search for. That is making a big difference. Then, of course, you need local material in local languages, etc., that is more catered. But as the words go digital, and I guess everybody sitting here, books will be digital, everything is digital, you can start putting that on the network, and that's how we continue to work. And we have worked with Columbia University to get out part of their education material as well. So I think it is in a process, but just to get access to the internet, that makes a difference for a person. It makes a huge difference in their life, for their village, for their personal life. And we need to realize that we take it for granted. We sit here, we have the fixed line, and we have the fixed phone and all of that. These people have a fantastic opportunity just to connect.
And you know, here there's discussion in the schools, should we still have books, e-books, what's the trade-off? There are not necessarily any books.
Right.
These are schools without libraries. These are schools without collections. All of a sudden, you have thousands of books available. I think it's only the beginning. We've got all the language issues. We've got local content issues. We're working with these communities to develop a wonderful curriculum around the MDGs, actually, so that the kids learn about their own environment. They learn about their own health. They learn about nutrition. They learn about the diseases like malaria, which they need to understand and be able to protect themselves against. And you can make a curriculum that's appropriate at all levels. So I think there are fantastic things to do, but it's the platform and the technology that to me is the transformative element of all of this.
But it's important just to point out that it's rural areas, wherever you are in the world, has the same challenge. So it's not, of course, Africa is a very poor region, and of course having a huge need for education and healthcare and all of that. But remote areas wherever you are, and if you're not part of the digital society and the network society and being connected, you're outside regardless where you are. So it is applicable for any region in the world. So I think that's what we need to see. That's why I believe it's so transformative. The next 10 to 15 years is going to increase the innovation by using these type of tools. And I think the people sitting here are part of that innovation. And my limit is my own imagination, I guess.
Right. But I think it's interesting to bring that innovation. You can't do it without the private sector. You can't do it without the ideas of the private sector, the resources of the private sector. But you still need governments, right? In some of these countries, there are a lot of challenges to good governance. How has the relation, as you go through implementing these projects, how has the relationship between technology companies such as ERICSSON and the governments evolved and changed? And do you see a shift in that domain?
Definitely. I mean, ERICSSON, we have employees in 180 countries, basically operate in any country that we are allowed to do. And I think that for For us, it has been a long journey, of course. We have been in many countries more than 100 years, so we are sort of part of the society. But definitely the last 3-4 years, we have seen an increasing sort of importance of infrastructure investments in countries. And it's not only about airports, not only about roads, it is about broadband and connectivity. So yes, we have seen clearly that, and I think that Jeff and I is part of the Broadband Commission that is partly out talking about this, and we see a correlation, because finally, if you can show a business case here, that is a correlation with the broadband penetration and GDP growth, then you can definitely prove it, and we can see that. So I think that, yes, the discussions has come to a total different level of it, and I think that what we would like to see is, of course, that you sort of having goals for broadband penetration, that's fine, but put it together with education level in the country as well, because then you start to get the real sort of right behavior.
But this also makes decentralization real, because you don't need to go through the central government ministry down to this level. That's one of the wonders of this technology. And you can track how it's being used. You can have direct point-to-point contacts in ways that old government couldn't do. So I think one of the aspects of technology that really is fundamental is that it's also changing the way to deliver services, or at least should be. Someday it's even going to come to the United States for some of our services. You know, we are lagging far behind in mHealth and eHealth, and the president's begging the health sector to get online and so forth, and it takes a long time because we've got established practices that have to be overcome, whereas in some of the poorer countries, they can leapfrog to the more effective systems. I think, by the way, that's really true and really interesting from my perspective, vantage point, for higher education in the United States, because it's not only going to be rural, poor schools that are going to be transformed, it's going to be every place. And we have a business model problem in health and education, that these are very expensive services right now. Major research university in the United States for a kid to go to college is a lot of money, and it's out of the price range for a lot of families. And I think this technology is going to dramatically lower the costs and the access and lower the access barriers for higher education. It's amazing. I'm sure a lot of people here, everybody knows about it, but 2 Stanford professors this year decided to put their class online and invite worldwide students to participate. Yes. They have 58,000 students registered around the world in this computer technology, artificial intelligence class. But that's going to be the way education is going to go, because it really is almost a zero marginal cost activity if you can get it out through broadband.
Well, I mean, I think speaking of audiences here, we've got a couple of minutes left. We have, in physical persons here, a very connected people, and through live stream.
We're rethinking communication here.
Yes, exactly. But I did see a few people write down on paper. They're
thinking more about the computers, yes.
But I guess to both of you, what is the message to this audience and to the audience that is listening to us over webcast, these digitally connected people? How can they make a difference? Where should they get involved?
I would love them to come partner and help us figure out how to make this Connect to Learn really work, global scale, every child getting the education that they want, need, and using technologies to the maximum. And this Connect to Learn platform that ERICSSON has helped to empower, I think can empower that universal secondary education everywhere.
Besides understanding, which I know you do, the huge power and transformation we're going to see the next 10 to 20 years in mobility and broadband, I think that what we need to work much better with these type of groups is, of course, rethink anything we're doing. Rethink how we communicate in this room, sitting us talking here. You are doing your things. Rethink education totally. I mean, it's not about one teacher standing in the room telling 20 students this is the way it is. We need to embrace that, and you are a great source of the rethink of anything we're doing, using technology in another way that it was never thought about, because we built this technology for making a voice call for 20, 30 years ago. That was the whole idea. And if you look today, how do you use the networks today? 20% of the networks, if you take it all, is phone calls, and if you take mobile networks, it's even less. So it's a huge difference how we use the networks, and the people in this room, they are rethinking how we use it, and that I just encourage you to continue to do.
But it also sounds to me that what you're trying to do is so new that we don't even know how the people that are being given this technology will in fact use it. And that we may have a lot of
Yes,
lessons to learn.
absolutely.
It's going to be a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
And be a lot of lessons drawn applicable to what goes on in this part of the world.
And not just two-way, because this morning in our weekly global classroom, the teacher stood up and talked to 25 students in the class, but then 25 students in 25 campuses around the world simultaneously by live video. So that's not a two-way conversation. That is a worldwide conversation now. That global classroom, I think, is also another way that education is going to move in the future.
Great. All right. Professor Sachs, thank you very much. Hans Vestberg, thank you very much. And we're only 17 seconds over.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.